and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and the master of the grapes himself, Mr. Matt Freeman. Matt, could you spend the next 60 seconds of the podcast telling me some fun facts about making wine?
Yeah, sure. So it comes from grapes, as you said. That's one fact that I know.
True.
So you mash up the grapes, and then of course you're going to want to pour in about 13% of that volume of just grain alcohol.
Oh,
because that's how it becomes wine. And then there's like different flavor profiles of like citrus and strawberry, and sometimes there's like a barnyard smell. So you're going to want to get those things, and you're going to want to put those into the wine also.
Now, when you say a barnyard smell, what things would we put in the wine?
Pig manure mainly is that. I find that to be the most reliable. Actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what is the difference between red and white wine?
It's just how much of the pig manure you add.
Oh, so all wine has pig manure then?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the white wine has relatively little though.
Oh, so it's the worst of the two wines?
Well, you just got to add more grain alcohol.
Now what would rosé be in this pig manure situation?
So it's called rosé. So there's going to be some roses that you've just thrown in there.
I mean, seems like definitely a thing that someone would know that knew deeply what rosé was would say yes.
And that's where the color comes from, obviously.
Yeah. Which is the color of
roses, pink, red.
I mean, you were right the first time. Good job, Matt. Well done.
Yeah, I know a lot about vineyards.
So stupid. Oh my God, let's do the podcast now.
All right.
This week, our series Deconstructing the Films of Ridley Scott continues with the director's 16th film. Matt, we're on part 16 of this 26-part series, if you can believe it.
No, that's a huge number of films. This is the longest by far, isn't it?
But yeah, I don't know if we're going to ever do one quite as long as this again. But it's been fun, but gosh, it's a lot of movies.
It is.
This week, we're talking about 2006's A Good Year. A Good Year. Matt learned the meaning of the name of that movie just not too long ago.
Yeah, well, I figured it out after thinking about it.
You're so intelligent. This is why people listen to us.
We'll tell you later. We'll tell you the meaning of the name later.
You'll get it.
Yeah.
After that, Matt, did you know there's like 17 nerd shows out all at the same time right now?
I had heard that. Yeah. I mean, and some of them I even have watched a few episodes of.
Yeah, so we're gonna catch up on House of the Dragon. We're gonna catch up on Rings of Power, which I don't think we've talked about at all on the show, and we're gonna talk a little bit about, or at least I'm gonna talk a little bit about the newest Disney Plus show, Andor, a Star Wars show, which I think is the formal title, Andor, a Star Wars show.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. This is going to be a very silly episode, but let's get into our main topic of the week and talk all about Ridley Scott's A Good Year.
Your Uncle Henry hasn't updated his will in over 20 years. So you get everything.
The old farmhouse and the vineyard and the grapes and everything.
So, where are we, Max?
Avonlea. Look, they're both the D3. I've got a GPS here with a stutter and a... Oh, shut up!
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A British investment broker inherits his uncle's chateau and vineyard in Provence, where he spent much of his childhood. He discovers a new laid-back lifestyle as he tries to renovate the estate to be sold.
This movie was written by Mark Klein, based on a novel by Peter Mayle. It is directed by Sir Ridley Scott and stars Russell Crowe, Albert Finney, and Marion Cotillard. Even though she's like eighth billing for some weird reason, she's the female lead of the movie, and yet not high on billing, which is annoying because she's also an Academy Award-winning actress. That's incredible.
Yeah, I guess so are Albert Finney and Russell Crowe, but yes, that's
okay.
It's annoying.
Touche. Matt, I want to take you back. I want to take you back to a week ago, this very night, a week ago, where you said this movie looks really, really boring, but I'm sure I will love it.
Mhm.
So fast forward 1 week later, Matt, what did you think of Ridley Scott's A Good Year?
I guess I was basically correct in my guess, personally, because it it's it's a dramedy is what it is.
Mhm.
You know, I keep wanting to say it's a romantic comedy. It's not funny enough to be a romantic comedy. It's not serious enough to be a drama. It's right in the middle. It's a dramedy, and it's amusing. It's entertaining. It's lighthearted. It kind of makes you happy. You walk away from it feeling good. It's well made. It's it's directing all of Ridley Scott's considerable talent, and Russell Crowe, and all these other great actors, considerable acting talent, into what is really a very, very simple dramedy, just light fare script.
Yeah.
And the result is quite pleasing. What did you feel about it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I said earlier in the day that if movies are rock and roll, then this movie is soft rock, and I think I think that's a very apt description of exactly what this movie is. It's pleasurable to the ear. I have really no big complaints about it. I very much enjoyed my time with it, but it's never going to be a movie I'm going to be like, oh, this is a good year to revisit this film. See what I did there?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I like this movie a whole bunch, actually. I think the other thing I called this movie, I want to put this in like a subgenre of film called We Bought a Zoos, where it's basically a series of movies in which a man usually, not always, but usually a man either finds himself in possession of a property or irrationally buys a property that he takes himself or his family to. And the lifestyle of this property is drastically different from the lifestyle he had before he came there. And he learns about himself and he reevaluates his priorities in his life while doing. I mean, like, this is a movie they've made 100 times before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think this particular instance of it really benefits from Ridley Scott's particular skills at filmmaking. To where this was just fun to watch. Like, I just had a good time watching this movie.
Yeah, there's lengthy sections, maybe my favorite sections even, where it's like him first coming to the chateau and then just like wandering around, and the visual storytelling linking up these different things he's finding and then remembering his past, and just standard like Ridley Scott stuff, just detail oriented, very, very visually emotions driven. And it does sweep you up. Like I think that's the thing about Ridley Scott. If he wants you to feel an emotion, you're going to feel that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so the emotions he wants you to feel here are these sort of wistful longing for a simpler existence, and the warm sun on your face as you walk in no rush between the rows of grapevines. And he absolutely casts that spell on you. And it's just, it really is a very seductive movie. Like, I'm not going to lie. After I watched the movie, I was thinking like, where do I want to retire to?
Let's buy a vineyard and move to France. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It makes it seem very appealing.
I think it's really funny that in last week's movie, Ridley Scott shot France as if it was a terrible hellhole that we must escape from immediately. And then 1 week later, he's shooting France as a beautiful mecca that we all need to find a way to get to in order to live the correct type of life. It just shows what context does for you. It's
great. And then in contrast, he's making England look like this sterile glass and steel and concrete and overcast skies and like unhealthy looking people rushing about in their gray suits, just overwhelmingly oppressive environment.
Yeah, and he didn't have to do a lot of that because that's what London already is. Just kidding.
There's no color grading. That's just
no, that's just London. Yeah, that's just London. And he's like, oh, we better wait for the weather to work for us. We need overcast and shitty. It's every day. No, I think it's really great. And I mean, like, here's the thing is, like, I'm kind of already halfway on board for this type of movie. And it's interesting because I have never once in my life related to the character that Russell Crowe is at the beginning of this movie, like the kind of obsessed with work, asshole-ish type of character. That's never been me, but I always do relate to the part of the character that is I need to slow down and enjoy life type part. Because I think the fun thing these movies do is it makes that choice so clearly the obvious correct choice that like you can really take a lot of enjoyment out of like watching the character be like, oh, I don't know what to do, and you're like, oh, sterile, terrible office, or Marion Cotillard and a beautiful winery. I don't know, Russell, what do we do? I just love that like it's simple in that way. Like the correct choice in these movies is obvious. This is not like a movie that's exploring morality or you know, really diving deep into these things. It's like the correct choice is obvious, the wrong choice is obvious, and we're just watching the character get to the point where he makes that correct choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why it was fun to have Russell Crowe in this role, because he definitely brings a lot to the role. Like,
yes,
I was thinking about, like, imagine this role played by, look, I'm not trying to put these actors on blast exactly, but like, you know, a young Matthew McConaughey or Ryan Reynolds, or sort of another good looking pretty boy leading man type. See, that's kind of a bad example because I actually like both of those guys.
yeah, I was gonna say I like those actors a lot.
But like just it didn't need. I think what I'm trying to say is it didn't need Russell Crowe's full horsepower, but he brought his game, and it elevated it, and it made this, I think, a more complex and interesting character to watch evolve than it would have been if it were just motivated by the screenplay.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because this is not. Russell Crowe is such an interesting choice for this movie because it's not the type of movie you would see a Russell Crowe type cast in. Which, I mean, no offense to Russell Crowe, but like I heard that Gerard Butler was, you know, being considered for this movie and was maybe on board at a time and then eventually dropped out. You could imagine that type of person, you know, like like Russell Crowe, as we've said, is a character actor who is good enough to kind of sometimes slip into the leading man role. But really at his core, he is a character actor. And it's just like, even in this movie, he's like a little bit fluffier, I'll call it. Like he's not like svelte cut body Russell Crowe. He's not Gladiator Russell Crowe, right? Like he started to bulk up a little bit into the guy he is now, you know, that we see in Zeus, where he's a big dude in the newest Thor movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he looks, honestly, what he looks like is a normal dude who also is incredibly handsome because he's Russell Crowe. But like body type wise, he just looks like a normal dude. And I think it's really interesting because like that's just not the type I think you might typically see in a movie like this. You'd want like the chiseled, you know, extremely athletic leading man type. And I love that they didn't do that with this movie, because I think it does something really interesting with it where he becomes immediately more relatable in a lot of ways. Because I'm not saying I look like Russell Crowe. That's not what I'm saying. But like he is believable as you know, just a guy, a trader in London who works all the fucking time and doesn't exercise. And like he's just completely believable in this role.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, the scenes where he's like playing tennis and sweating profusely, it's like, it kind of helps sell that. You know, it's interesting. Maybe this is a totally insane statement, so I'll put this to the crowd. But like, I think Russell Crowe, if Russell Crowe weren't Russell Crowe, if he were just some guy that you saw on the street, I don't think he would strike you as incredibly handsome. I think it all comes from his personal charisma and ability to emote and use his face to convey, you know, emotion. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to objectively judge handsomeness. That's not really a thing, right?
I don't know either. I mean, it feels weird for two straight men to be like, would I give this guy a second glance if I walked by him on the street? I don't know. Probably not generally, but like, I think you might be right. I think there is something like the key to Russell Crowe is that charisma, is like when he opens his mouth and starts talking to you and interacting with you. And by you, I mean the other actors, obviously not the two of us, but I think there's something just incredibly alluring about that. And I think that is true in this movie, but you're right. I don't think that's kind of like character actor in Hollywood is code for not gorgeous, right? Like that's, that's kind of what it comes down to. And I think I would say that is firmly where he belongs. And he's remarkable in this movie. Like he really is. I think you're absolutely right that this movie does not require him to really be giving his all. He could have kind of slept through this movie if he wanted to, and it probably would have worked okay. But no, he doesn't. He really gives it his all. And I think he's really enjoying playing the smarmy asshole character. I think he's really, really enjoying that. He doesn't always get to do that, but when he really does, he really he really goes for it.
Yeah. I like that part of the movie. I mean, it's funny because I feel like often sort of the part of the movie where you're setting up your main character as like, oh, look how flawed he is. Oh, he sucks. Oh, but like we know he's gonna get better, so that's why we're patient. Like this movie had, I think, more fun with that and spent more time in that. Like because we got to know like his personal assistant and like the guy that he worked with and like his boss and like at least one other like competitor. There were like a number of and then also of course his self-proclaimed best friend. Who so there's like a whole raft of characters who come in from that part of the movie, and that really allows us to play with that tone. I actually think it is kind of a funny movie. It's not a comedy in the sense that you're just rolling half the time, but there is substantial humor and levity, and a lot of the humor is just like, oh, he's such an asshole. He's such an ass, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Greg House, I think, is another good example where it's like he's smarter than you and he knows it and he's gonna rub it in, or he's gonna have the perfect snide quip to throw in there. And he, like you said, he executes it perfectly. It's great.
Yeah, and again, I think the movie's really helping him with that. I love the way the characters are introduced. Like the opening scene with him, with Russell Crowe's character as a young boy, with his uncle played by Albert Finney, who I love, by the way. I love Albert Finney so much. Yeah. Although I think like this stage of his career, Albert Finney just always seems like he's out of breath. Am I wrong in that? Like every time he talks, it seems like he's like just been running a marathon and he's just struggling to have breath. But I mean, I think that's, it gives his character a certain amount of charm to it. But anyway, like we introduce this character as a little kid, and the thing we see him do is we see him cheat at chess. He cheats at chess, and his uncle knows he cheats at chess, gives him this long speech, and then like obviously gives him the opportunity to come clean about cheating at chess. And we see the thing he does is say, checkmate. He wins. And that is such a great defining moment because you can kind of see the exact link between that guy and the guy that's going to do clearly illegal market manipulation to make a few $1 million and piss everyone around him off. It's a perfect like lead in. It's a perfect way to introduce the character. And then we meet him as an adult, and just like the first 15 minutes of this movie are just like, let's make him look like the biggest asshole we can. And it's everything in the movie is working towards that. The way he's shot, the way we see characters react to him, the way we see other, like my favorite little bit of this is he's sitting in a chair and his assistants around him, and he's reading the newspaper. And strewn about him on the floor are just pages of the newspaper. And they don't even really draw too much attention to this. But basically what it is when he finishes reading a page of the newspaper, he just throws it on the floor because he doesn't give a shit about anything. He doesn't give a shit. He's not going to be the one to clean it up. So he doesn't care. And it's like it's a really perfect scene, setting character moment where without any dialogue, we just work to establish who he is. And I love that shit so much.
Yeah, that's great. I love that example. Yeah, he it's interesting. Like he has this personal assistant, and it's not that they have a bad relationship, but neither does he treat her particularly well. And it's interesting to kind of that's a background element that kind of evolves over the course of the movie too.
That's Gemma, played by Archie Panjaiba, who she's phenomenal, and like she's really good too. That's the thing that I think elevates this movie is all these movies always have like the bit characters from his other life that are like trying to convince him that the life he's starting to fall in love with is the wrong one. And I think this movie has like 6 of them, but I love that the relationships of these characters are complicated because he entirely relies on Gemma for his life. Like she is the key to everything kind of. And it's not that she's like, I think she's an interesting character because she's not necessarily like pushing him toward coming back, but she's not like pushing him towards staying either. She's just, I don't know. What did you think of her place in the story?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, she is the externalization of the voice in his head that's saying, like, what are you doing, man? Your whole life is here in England. You have all of this power and money. You have what you always thought you wanted. And so she's looking at him, and in her eyes you can kind of see this like disbelief of like, how could you abandon this? And it's not like she's saying like, no man, you can't do this to me, or anything like that. It's just you have to, not, you don't have to, but it helps to have an outward character sort of representing that perspective of like incredulity that you would abandon your wonderful life in London.
Sure, but I feel like the Kenny character kind of plays that much more directly than Gemma does. Like Kenny is the one who is actively like played by Rafe Spall, who is another character actor that you see in a bunch of stuff that I tend to really love.
Well, you know, I don't necessarily want to take back what I said a second ago.
Oh wait, no, it's actually Tom Hollander. Sorry, who I was thinking of. Charlie is the his best friend. Yeah.
But like, you know, like I said, he doesn't treat her particularly well, but neither is it like a terrible abusive relationship. Like they have kind of a friendship and a working relationship, and that allows you to kind of humanize him because he's sort of doing ridiculous, destructive things in the first part of the movie, and then she's like the grounding point of sanity.
I mean, it's this fine line. You know, we've talked about this before, but like the movie needs you to hate him, or not. The movie needs you to know he's an asshole, but we can't actually hate him, right? Because if we hate him, the movie doesn't work. And so we need to recognize his terrible qualities while also still being aware of some of the good qualities that he does have. And his relationship with Gemma does seem, you know, good, relatively good.
It's relatively good. It's just he is still kind of an asshole in general.
Yes, and he prides himself on his being an asshole. Like I love the scene where he like has pissed off every trader in the city and then goes in to this party specifically to gloat over them. He not only is he an asshole, but he's a self-acknowledged asshole that feeds off of it. He likes it. And that is, of course, you know, the design of the movie is that's directly challenged when he inherits this chateau and goes to France and meets people that, you know, shockingly are not assholes.
It's interesting how we're spending so much more time talking about the early part of the movie. I think it's because once we get to France, there's not a lot of plot, actually. It's kind of just, okay, it's interesting because there tries to be a mystery element in the movie, which I don't know if that needed to be there at all, honestly. I guess it did make me kind of curious, but it's certainly not why I was watching. Like I was mainly watching for how is this romance going to unfold.
I think the thing is, because I thought about this while I was watching the movie, and while I was watching the movie, I was saying, I'm glad this mystery element is here because it's kind of pulling us through the movie, even though, like, on retrospect, like I don't even know if it's right to call it a mystery element because, like, it's very obvious what the mystery is. Like, like the first second they say, "Oh, there's this other wine," and we don't know who's making it. I was like, "Oh, well, it's definitely made here." But you're kind of, I guess the curiosity of the mystery is not knowing where the wine comes from, but knowing why the characters are keeping it a secret. And I think that's one that if I had one complaint about the movie, it's that I don't think they stick the landing of the reveal of the mystery, which is basically like the wine grower character has, you know, been intentionally keeping this a secret and trying to convince Russell Crowe's character that the vineyard is actually worthless by feeding him this intentionally bad wine where they have this wonderful wine. And there's we were talking about this earlier. There's like a throwaway line in the movie where like, these vines are illegal. And I don't know what that means. I mean, I feel like this movie works really well as a person who doesn't know a lot about wine. Like there's a few little bits and pieces where they tell you some facts about fermenting wine, but really the focus of the movie is not details on how the process of making wine works. And then there's that line and you're just like, I don't know about law or wine, but like, why would a vine be illegal?
So this is my perspective on what's going on here in the movie is somebody had the idea that the perfect metaphor for everything they're doing in the movie is he looks at the chateau, he sees a rundown, old, dilapidated building with a bunch of plants out back, and he devalues it. And then as the movie goes on, he begins to understand the value of the place that he had completely overlooked and not understood. And part of that is at first seeing the wines as the vines as shitty, and the wine, the wine that he is told comes from the vineyard is shitty. And then toward the end of the movie, he like realizes the value of the vineyard symbolically through, the wine is actually this masterful wine that is highly sought after. And that sort of works on the level of, it's a metaphor for the shift in his character. But then you have to come up with the messy plot mechanics of like, okay, but why would he change his mind about the quality of the wine? And then you make up this story about like, well, they're lying about where the wine is coming from. Why? It's illegal or something. It doesn't really work. It's one of the few things where I'm just like, this didn't connect terribly well. Like I was already bought into, he runs this woman off the road with his car, and then she's pissed off at him, and then he thinks she's hot, and then he's pursuing her, and she's an interesting character, and you buy their dynamic. They have chemistry, all of this. That was enough for me. The wine mystery, I was like, I did like the vintner character, the guy who was responsible for the wine.
Oh, he was great. Yeah.
I liked all that stuff. I just didn't. It's really relatively minor. I'm just like, if anything, the reason I'm like nagging on it is I'm just like, how could this have been fixed? Because I feel like it could have been fixed in a way that landed more satisfyingly.
I agree. I mean, I think that the trouble with the scene is, if I had understood the full scope of what the hell was going on there, I feel like the emotional moment of, oh no, this has been our wine all along, and we hid it from you because we didn't trust you, because you just weren't a trustworthy person. And if you had just allowed yourself, as you said, to see the magic of this place, you probably would have maybe figured it out for yourself that it's obviously from here. But you couldn't do that because you couldn't see past yourself. And that is an important emotional moment. That's, arguably one of the climactic moments of the movie, where he realizes, oh, I never truly saw the value of this place. And instead of focusing on that emotion, I was like, what? The grapes are elite. So, because I even really like, I sat down and typed out the series of events to you to make sure I understood it correctly. So I was like, okay, so they were faking by intentionally growing shitty wine. And then the guy that they hired to come test the vines and the ground and the soil and all that, when he said it was actually terrible, he was lying, because he was actually paid off by the vintner to intentionally do that. Okay, it feels overwritten. And actually, like, when you learn that this is a novel, like, it actually, I think, all makes sense, right? When like this was a novel first, you're like, oh, well, you have hundreds and hundreds of pages to kind of like flesh out all these details in a way that's much more satisfying. But in the moment in the film, I was just scratching my head a little bit, and that's not what you want to happen. So yeah, I mean, the problem of it is it was distracting enough to where it took me out of the emotional moment, and I think that's the most important moment to be emotional in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It was unnecessarily distracting, and really, yeah, it's a shame, because it was otherwise that was the "this is why you suck" speech.
Yeah.
But then it was kind of, yeah.
So in that line of thinking, what did you think of the Abby Cornish character who plays his, I guess, cousin, who ends up being his Uncle Henry's daughter, who kind of shows up to throw a wrinkle in things, because that would mean that he wouldn't actually own the vineyard if she was really his daughter.
Yeah. So, just in terms of tropes, you have to have some kind of complication or ticking clock element or something along these lines to push things along and make it so that, like, I like the element where it's not as simple as like, oh, he's just been handed this opportunity and he can take it or leave it. It's like, he's totally ready to abandon it. But now the complication is, oh no, now I want it because maybe she's entitled to it. But of course, he only wants it so he can sell it at first. It's funny because the movie doesn't even really tell us, unless I miss something at the end. She should own the place at the end. So he's just hanging out there. I guess
she owns it outright. So he writes the letter.
Yeah. Giving it
pretending
to her,
be the uncle, basically creating the documentation proof that proves that she's his daughter. Therefore, they establish earlier in the movie that even if the winery had already been sold, her stepping forward and saying that she has claim could reverse the sale under French law. They set this all up pretty well. It's pretty well set up to make this ending work.
Yes.
So yeah, she just owns it outright. She reversed the sale. She owns it outright. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's just living there. I mean, I assume she would allow him to live there. So I guess that's what he's doing, is he's just living there, but she's making all the decisions with what's his name.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not that I needed an explanation, but I was at the fact that he was there for a second, I was like, well, wait, and I guess it's like, it doesn't matter. He's rich. He could just buy another chateau or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So about that, this is, so at the end, just so I'm understanding correctly, maybe this is I really enjoyed this movie, but this is, again, a part that I think was a little confusingly shown. So he's at his job and he's given two options, right? They basically tell him they will, I guess, buy him out of his contract or something, give him a shit ton of money, or they'll make him a partner and he'll get to work there forever, right? And he chooses the money, obviously, because he doesn't want to work there. So, and we see the painting, was it a Van Gogh, I think? Yeah. The Van Gogh, we see that. Is the one that he puts up in the restaurant the real one? Or
I don't know, man. The fact that it's in the restaurant, I was like, wait a minute. How long has that been there? Is she noticing it now and she's surprised because it wasn't there before? And did he buy the Van Gogh? And
I think he bought it and put it in there without her noticing it, which I don't know how that would work.
I don't know how that would work either.
So in my mind, I was like, oh, he bought the restaurant. He's bought the restaurant that she works at, and he bought that now. But I don't think there's anything in the movie that says that.
Well, that's what's the movie is pretty ambiguous about how rich he actually is. He's just arbitrarily rich, but not so rich that he can do whatever he wants, I guess.
I still don't understand why they gave him so much money. I don't why were those I really thought the choices were going to be like we're offering you partner. Like, instead of offering him a choice, just say we're offering you partner, and the choice is, do I want to take this or do I want to leave this job?
Maybe I missed something. I thought they just said, we're offering you partner, and then he chose to quit and maybe take a severance package or something. I don't know.
Oh, I thought he specifically said, here's the choice between money or I don't know. It doesn't actually matter. These are quibbles I'm quibbling on, but it just, I wasn't clear. I was like, I guess he bought the painting from that guy. Cause I mean, it's actually a really wonderful moment where he says, where in order to make his decision, the thing that helps him make his decision is the idea that this incredibly rich guy who says he has hobbies, one of his hobbies is collecting art, and the real painting he keeps locked up in a vault somewhere and never actually looks at it. And the one that he has on display is just a $200,000 forgery, which is art is insane sometimes. And he's like, do you ever look at it? Do you go down into the vault? And it's like this realization that, oh, you have all this stuff, but you're not appreciating it. You're not enjoying it. You're just locking it up. And it's a really great moment. But then we cut over to the painting being in the restaurant. And I'm literally just like, what? So did he bought it from him then?
I think he bought it. I mean, what else are we supposed to think? Right. Because she seems surprised to see it there, which means, like it'll be one thing.
So why would he sell it to him? I don't understand.
I don't know. It makes no sense. So I think there's like it's interesting that the sorts of things that we're nitpicking at, it's all like because the movie is overly complicated, and because it's overly complicated, they have to like fix it in the dialogue and have these stupid lines like the vines are illegal, and you're like, what? Huh? And then just blow past that. And then, and so it's like there's like one too many threads in the tapestry, and you just need it's funny because we said it's a simple, straightforward dramedy.
I mean, the big movements of it are.
Yeah. But it just adds too many. I use the word complications a couple times. It just adds a few too many of those, where you're like, what is the point of this? What is this particular element serving in the greater whole?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not. And I mean, that's the fun thing about this movie is you boot it up and you're like, oh, this is this is an hour and 57 minutes long. And you're like, movies like this are not 2 hours long, right? Movies like this are 90 minutes long. And Ridley Scott cannot make a 90-minute movie to save his life. Every single Ridley Scott movie is at least 2 hours long. And it's just like, these are the type of things where you wonder, this is why adaptations are so often a mixed thing, because it's so hard to take something as big and long as a whole novel and just shrink it down to just this one 2 hour or 90-minute story. And that it just feels like some of these things are like, oh, we could have just trimmed a lot of this stuff. We could have just there's a way to get 30 minutes out of this movie. And I mean, again, I really, really enjoyed the movie, but I just think there are ways of cutting some of this more confusing stuff instead of like trying to make it work or trying to make it explainable. Just get it out of there.
Yeah.
Just focus on the core emotions, which is him and his cousin, him and his new girl, and him and the winemaker. Those are the three core kind of relationships that he has throughout the movie.
I kind of want to take that and kind of center it as a meta discussion about Ridley Scott, because I think if he were here, he would be like, no. Movies, he has like a very particular view, I feel, on like what movies are. And to him, a movie is like a luscious, extravagant experience that you immerse yourself in for a good solid 2 hours. And maybe he actually thinks 2 hours, or maybe he just thinks like long enough that you feel lost and immersed and fully like inside the movie. And he's just like, yeah, like this drive for efficiency and storytelling is just killing the artistic ability to sweep a person up into the film and have them feel like they're lost and totally identified with the experience of watching. Like I genuinely feel like philosophically there is a reason he keeps making these movies, and we keep saying like, oh my God, this is so long. Like I enjoyed it, but Jesus, it was long, and I had to watch it over the course of 2 days. And like I think this is his actual intent, is like, that's what I want the movie to be.
Yeah,
I want it to be
a movie. Yeah.
This journey that I'm taking you on. And if your idea of a movie is an hour and a half, then like, okay, fine, there's plenty of other movies. I guess this isn't for you. And I admit that like I like efficiency in storytelling. I like a good, crisp, clean hour and a half movie that just lands. And by the way, a good hour and a half movie can still impact you really hard. So
certainly.
But he seemed just evidentially, based on what we've been seeing and how we've been reacting, it really seems like he is. If somebody in the scripting process was like, "Hey, Ridley, I think we could cut 20 minutes out of this easily," I think he'd be like, no, I like it the way it is.
Yeah, he'd say, fuck you, we can cut your face off.
Yeah, and then he'd fire that person.
Yeah, you're fired. Yeah. I probably shouldn't say that. He's probably a delight to work with. I have no idea.
Yeah, never heard a complaint about him, actually.
I think you're right. I don't want to end on like a negative note, because like I said, I really enjoyed my time with this film. I really did. I think it's absolute. It's fun to watch. It is like, I think you're right. It's not funny, but it's definitely like sensible chuckle funny. Like there's, I like the number of times Russell Crowe says bollocks as something happens is delightful to me. I really enjoyed that. I think when he falls into the pool and the pool's like, there's cow shit at the bottom of the pool, and then the pool's filling up with water, and then he puts the water in his mouth and spits it out. That was the most disgusting moment in the film for me.
Gross. That was a good 5 to 10 minutes, and maybe didn't need to be in the movie actually, but that's fine.
I don't know. I think yes, but I also think like it's a really clever narrative device to force him in a situation where he has to stay still and not leave and just like be there and stuck with his own thoughts. Like I appreciated that for that. So I mean, this is where I'm torn about this, is like, I actually like that the movie takes its time, but also I wish it could have been a little bit shorter. I don't know how to wrestle with these two seemingly opposing ideas.
We'll just have to continue wrestling with it as we go down his career further, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to parenthetically talk about Russell Crowe, because I forgot, honestly, until like today, that we are settling in for a streak of Russell Crowe.
Uh-huh.
He was in Gladiator. Okay, then he took one movie off for Hannibal. And no, sorry, he took three movies off.
Yeah, he took a few movies off.
He took four whatever, 4 movies. Yeah,
he took 17 movies off.
And then we're gonna have next American Gangster, starring top billing Russell Crowe.
Yeah, he's the second lead. I think it's Denzel and then Russell Crowe.
Yep. Then, I'm looking at Wikipedia, but you might be right. Then we have Body of Lies, which has Russell Crowe. It's really a Leo DiCaprio movie, but it has Russell, has Russ. And then we have Robin.
Wait, time out. Does he go by Russ?
I doubt it. I don't think so.
I've literally never heard Russell Crowe be called Russ before in my life.
That would feel really weird, yeah. And then we've got Robin Hood, the 2010 Robin Hood, with again starring Russell Crowe as Robin Hood. So this is the period of time. I just want to say, like love Russell Crowe. Always loved Russell Crowe. He has kind of a fascinating career. He did all these interesting movies, with a lot of them, with Ridley Scott, who's this genius filmmaker. So there's kind of this synergy that they have, I think. And of course, this is also like the period of time where all of the like bad stories about Russell Crowe come from. And this is sort of the period of time where like the character of Kirk Lazarus from Tropic Thunder is based off of. So I don't know. I'm gearing up to continue to discuss Russell Crowe for a while. And I just want to mention that.
Is Kirk Lazarus actually supposed to be a Russell Crowe type? Was that intentional?
I felt strongly between the fact that Robert Downey Jr. is doing an Australian accent and the fact that he has this like extremely self-serious persona and like takes acting so seriously. It's got to be either like Russell Crowe or a mixture of Russell Crowe and a Daniel Day-Lewis type of actor.
Sure.
But I definitely feel like Russell Crowe is, given the time that movie came out and Russell Crowe's stardom at that point, I feel like
I think you're probably right. It's pretty remarkable because like since so many of these movies are definitely like, wait, Ridley Scott directed that movies? I never really knew Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott were like a oft partnership, like I knew Gladiator and then I knew Robin Hood. And those were the two movies I definitely knew that Russell Crowe was in that Ridley Scott directed. And I didn't know all these ones we're about to cover over these next few weeks were like I did not know American Gangster was a Ridley Scott movie. I did not know this was a Ridley Scott movie. I did not know that Body of Lies was a Ridley Scott movie. These are not movies I would have typically said, oh yeah, definitely Ridley Scott. So these are all these Russell Crowe movies in the height of Russell Crowe's stardom that I just didn't know were Ridley Scott movies.
Yeah, I didn't either. So it's really interesting because we thought of ourselves as being Ridley fans even before we started this, and we're just liars.
Yeah, I mean it's really funny because like I even knowing the number, like I say, when we were preparing for this thing, I was like, it's 26 movies, and I was like, oh yes, I know them all. And then you actually look down the list, and you're like, wait, this one, really? Like Matchstick Men, I think is still the one that I'm like, I can't believe Ridley Scott directed that movie.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think G.I. Jane for me is the one that feels the weirdest, but yeah. I get you.
But we move on from here. We move on to, as you said, American Gangster, a movie I did see and again didn't know it was Ridley Scott, but have very fond memories of. So I think I'm going to enjoy this one. This is a revisit, and I hope you do too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
All right, but we will be doing that in a couple of weeks because we do have to do our canon episode next week. So we'll be back to Ridley Scott in 2 weeks, and back to Russell Crowe as well. So we'll see the chameleon that is Russell Crowe enter a new character, and he's going to play American this time. He's going to do American accent.
Love it.
Not a British accent.
That's perfect. Can't wait.
Doof. All right, Matt, before we go, I wanted to have a pretty quick conversation with you about the nerd shows that we've all been watching. I think the thing we start with on this conversation, though, is you are not caught up on any of these shows, which is so okay. The one that is the most insane to me is Rings of Power. Like,
yeah,
we both didn't like how Game of Thrones ended like the majority of the world. And so I think like committing time to a new Game of Thrones show when you're not loving it entirely at the beginning, I think I understand that. You are obsessed with Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and that world. And so the idea that you're not making this thing appointment viewing the second each new episode is out is insane to me. So let's talk about Rings of Power and maybe why you're an episode behind on Rings of Power.
Yeah, that's I think, just to be blunt, I find it pretty slow and boring, and I'm not invested in any of the characters too deeply. I won't say I'm not invested at all, but it's slow enough that there's a kind of ratio of things have to be happening, and I have to be invested in the characters. And you can get away with some amount of flailing about and not necessarily moving me toward any particular destination, but you better get me back to characters I care about doing stuff that I care about pretty quickly. And it feels to me like the first like full 2 episodes were like this slow, deliberate table setting pace. And I was just like, where's the hook? You know, I need at least one of these guys I need to really care about. You just use the Game of Thrones example. Like, first episode of that show had as much plot in it. First episode of season 1 of Game of Thrones. The TV show Game of Thrones, not House of the Dragon.
Yes.
Had as much plot in it as like the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power plus the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon put together. It introduces all these characters, gives us dramatic moments that makes us care about them, and then ends on this fantastic cliffhanger, right? And then all these shows, there's just this like plotting pacing. Maybe I've gotten dumber and like shorter attention span, but I really don't think that's it. And I know I'm being a little bit harsh right now because it's not like I didn't enjoy these shows at all. I just find them so slow that when it's like, all right, do I want to spend an hour watching television right now? The answer has been no every time that I've thought of that question over the last couple of weeks. That's me.
Yeah. You're insane. No, I mean, like, here's the thing. When it comes to House of the Dragon, I am basically 100% here with you on this. I like the show. I think it's good. I do not think it's great, and I think it has a lot of problems. And I agree that one of its big problems is the pacing of the show, and this idea that they know that they're writing a show that's going to go on for years and years and years, and so they are like intentionally taking their time, and it's really, really preventing me from getting into the show. Also, I think House of the Dragon has problems with who am I supposed to be rooting for? Like, I think the thing about Game of Thrones, to make that comparison again, is you have the Starks, right? You have the Starks, and they're there throughout the show. And even as like you realize that the world is this terrible place, and even as you start to care about other characters, you always have the Starks to fall back on. It's clear you want to root for these people. And this show doesn't have that. This show is a bunch of royal people that are all terrible, and they all want to fuck their uncles. And I don't know who I'm supposed to be rooting for. I don't think you've watched this episode yet. It's I guess spoilers for episode 4 maybe of House of the Dragon. It's an episode in which Rhaenyra fucks her uncle, which everyone knew was coming because the first time they saw each other, I fucked each other. And I'm like, at least Game of Thrones had the sensibility to have the 2 characters that are related to each other, that bang each other, be the bad guys, at least for the first part of the show, where we're very clearly the bad ones. I feel like the show wants you to root for Rhaenyra's. I don't even know. Is that her name? Am I saying her name right?
I think it's Rhaenyra. I don't even know.
Whatever.
This is another problem. We've got Rhaenys and Rhaenyra, and it's a problem.
But then she fucks her uncle. Or I don't think she actually goes through with it. She wants to. It's a whole thing, Matt. I'm not going to go into it.
Okay.
Do you want me to root for that? Because that's weird. And I just don't. I think that's a big show. But here's what I'll say. I think Rings of Power is an incredible show. I think this is a really good show. I think this show is I will agree with you. There are some characters that I'm having trouble latching onto as much as others. I think the show wants Galadriel to be, I think, the lead, and I am having a lot of trouble caring about Galadriel at all. But I think there's so many other characters, and the world is so expansive and rich, and this is the most expensive show ever made in the world, and I think it's showing that. I think that they're using the money definitely because, like, I think these places are rich and wonderful, and getting to see Moria or Khazad-dûm like in its full glory was like jaw-dropping and wonderful, and that is what's carrying me through the show. And then there are other some of the human characters I'm really interested to, the Harfoot characters I'm really into, the big overarching movements of the story and where it's going. I mean, I think I broadly know the story. Obviously they're going to be making a lot of creative liberties as they go through, but I mean, I know where we're going to end, I guess. I don't know. I actually don't know where this show is going to end, but I know where the story is going to end broadly. But I am loving it. The episode you haven't watched spends a lot of time back with the dwarves, who are my absolute favorite character. And I think the relationship between Durin and Elrond is my my favorite thing in the show right now. And so when it focuses on them, I love it. I love it to death. And there's a lot of that in the latest episode, so I really, really liked it. But I don't know, man. I am totally in love with the show, and I think it's unfortunate that it's just going to be constantly compared to House of the Dragon because they're two shows that are on at the same time. So that like invites comparison. But man, I'm having so much more fun with it. I think House of the Dragon is so like dour and like everyone sucks and everything sucks. And this is a show that's like, the world is pretty cool. And I know there's this like darkness on the horizon, but look at this. Look, Numenor is like beautiful and awesome, and it's great to see it. And then the mines and I don't know, there's just something magical about it to me, and I'm really, really liking it.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, it's funny. You're reminding me of the stuff about the show that I do like. I think part of the problem is, like you said, the shows are on air at the same time. You know what I mean? And the consequence of that is like I only have so much time during the week when I could even conceivably watch television at all, and I just feel like booked and like overwhelmed, and I'm like I don't want to watch TV right now. Like even if the show was good, I can't like, and so that's one element I think that's just sort of inextricable in my mind from like, am I liking the show? So and then the other thing is like I'll just I think I don't remember if I've watched the first 3 or the first 2 episodes. I think I've just watched the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power, and I'm it's not that I'm not into the Harfoot characters. It's that because there are so many threads going, we just it's like what has happened in that plot line. It's like okay, she's found the Starman. Like that's bit. And I'm not trying to be like an asshole, but like that's it, right? So like we need to. I need to. It's like I said at the beginning of my long speech. It's like I need to not only care about them, but I need stuff to be happening, or I get bored.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's definitely a problem overall with the idea that, again, this is a show that is designed to last a long time. I think this is like one of the old rules of TV was you put everything you've got into every single episode because you have no idea which episode is going to be your last. So you don't put anything aside. You put everything on the table every time you sit down to make an episode of TV. And these 2 shows are shows that know for a fact that they don't have to do that. That HBO is committed to the world of Game of Thrones. It is committed to House of the Dragon. Amazon has spent $1 billion on this property, right? They are as long as this thing works, they are committed to telling the story and pumping it out. And so you have creators who I think are I don't want to speak ill of them. I think they're doing overall very good jobs, but they know that they can hold a little bit back, that they can save a little bit. And so what it does create is very slow roll of storytelling. Like we're 4 episodes into Rings of Power, I think. There's no rings. There's no rings yet. I mean, and the idea that a character is talking about creating rings is like a secondary plot element in the overall movement that's going on, even though that's what the show's named after. Like, we're going to get to the creation of the rings eventually. Like, that's going to happen because that's what the show is about, I think. And it's just like it's a lot of vagary of like, oh, the Sauron is still out there, he's coming, no one believes me, but I know it. And then we're seeing, through the perspective of the humans and that one elf as well, that, oh yes, look, orcs are here and they're moving and they're coming, and we're seeing all these things. But yeah, I mean, it feels a little bit like prologue. And I think House of the Dragon, for all 5 episodes, feel like prologue. Like, in next week's episode 6 is the one where they're going to recast the characters with older versions of themselves. Not every character, but all the younger characters they're going to recast. All the main characters they're going to recast, basically. And that it could be that the first 5 episodes are basically just a prologue to what the show is actually going to be, and that's going to start next week. But it's like, that's 5 hours. That's 2.5 Ridley Scott movies, and like, that's a long time. And I just like, I think they know that they can get away with that, and that's where I'm really struggling.
Yeah, and also it's like what? So your promise, I'm putting money in the bank towards some promise that you're going to like entertain me real good later on. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, there's no excuse to not be entertaining me the whole time. If they have a good writing staff, they can make any given episode of television good. Okay, good writing staff and a good sort of premise that the show is supposed to be, right? I like, again, I'm just thinking about Game of Thrones, where it's like they didn't wait to start. They weren't like, all right, let's take a few episodes to slowly introduce you to all the, these are the Lannisters, these are the Starks, and us King Robert, and all right, episode 5, let's start doing interesting things with them. No, it's like immediately shocking, interesting, dramatic things from episode 1.
Yeah,
every episode of season 1, right? And I'm like, there's just, I don't know, man. You're totally right. Like you're diagnostically correct that what they did is they're saying like, well, we have time, we can space things out. And I guess I'm just saying, like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I the reason is because this world is fascinating and you want to live in it. And the problem I have with House of the Dragon is, no, it isn't, and no, I don't. Mm-hmm. This is really the show that this most relates to me for right now is actually Netflix's The Crown, which is a show that tells the story of the British royal family, and specifically Queen Elizabeth, rest in peace. And one of the reasons is because what that show does is it has hired new cast at various points through the course of the show as the characters age up, as it moves through time. But basically it is a show about these people who are all rich aristocratic assholes that you shouldn't care about. And the thing that I think The Crown does so well, actually, is it takes all these rich aristocratic asshole characters that you shouldn't care about, and it makes them human. It fleshes them out, and it makes you somehow relate to them and sympathize with them and understand them on a level. And what House of the Dragon is doing is not that. I don't feel like any of these people are like relatable humans, except with the notable exception that is the king, who is the best character in the show because he's a useless fuck up that is just way in over his head about everything. And Paddy Considine like is doing such a great job with this guy. I love him. I wish the show was about him. It's not. And I like, it's so weird to me that like I honestly think people sat down on a room and said they wanted to do kind of The Crown-ish with this show. It's just not even as close to well made at all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything. I mean, think about I don't even remember the character's name. The king's new young wife.
Otto Hightower's. What is her name?
Exactly. Something Hightower, right? Okay. Problem number 1. I should be able to remember your character's names. Okay. And then problem number 2 is like, think about like, she should be like a character that we're interested in, right? Like she's kind of like Sansa in certain ways, where you've got like these pressures of culture and patriarchy pressing down on this young woman who's had to make all these sacrifices and decisions for the sake of, her father. And like that, she would have been a main character in if this were I don't know how to say this other than like if this were Game of Thrones, she would have been a main character. Like her plight is more interesting than Daemon. You know, it's like, well, that's a crazy thing to say. She doesn't have any dragons. Exactly. George R. R. Martin is always concerned with the downtrodden, the people who are in a bind, the people who want impossible things that the world won't let them have. That's dramatic, right?
Yeah.
I think that the show is just like aiming at a target that just has no innate like relatability or real meaningful pathos.
Yeah, why do I give a shit which one of these assholes ends up on the throne? Right?
Yeah.
Like, again, Game of Thrones had the Starks, it had Daenerys, it had Tyrion, it had characters that we gave a shit about. And it took a while to get there. It doesn't happen overnight, sure. But I do think from the get-go, we had a cast of characters that we were like, hell yeah, these are the good guys. We're on their side. Like, this is what, again, as you've said so many times, people underestimate the brilliance of George R. R. Martin. He understood that he wanted to take this fantasy trope story, and he really wanted to pick at it and examine it and explore the idea of like, okay, great, Aragorn, but what's your tax policy? Like, he wanted to do these things, but he also recognized the fundamentals of storytelling, which are, okay, but I got to get him on board first. I got to get him hooked first. And then I can really start to explore Jaime Lannister and what it means to be an honorable member of the King's, like what that means, what that oath means. And what does it mean when you're an oath breaker, but you did the right thing? Like, I still need someone to hook into. And so he makes the Starks as the prototypical fantasy family that is like the good guys. Oh, we love them from right away. We love them and we want to see them live and succeed and win, and then he can go from there. And this has none of that. I don't want to see any of these characters win. I don't care. It's funny. It's actually funny seeing them, like, it's enjoyable seeing them be shitty to each other, in like a Schadenfreude kind of way, but that doesn't like emotionally propel me through a series.
Well, it's basically as if the Lannisters were the only family and when we didn't have the Starks, like they're backstabbing and hateful in the way that the Lannisters always were. It's basically a whole show made up of the early season King's Landing scenes without any of the other stuff.
Yeah. And shot, unfortunately shot much more boring than any of that other stuff, because it's just people sitting in rooms talking, because the dragons cost so much money. Yeah. I will say to you, you mentioned the Lyanna, I think, no, it's not her. What the fuck? I had to look it up. The Hightower character.
Yeah.
After the episodes that you've seen, she does take a larger Alicent Hightower. She does take a kind of is slowly ramping up her importance in the story. Very, very slowly.
You know, but to me, I would still complain and say she should have been important when her life sucked and she was unimportant. When she was an unimportant character is when we should have been paying attention to her so we could understand her plight as she rises. You know what I mean? You know, the whole idea of the Targaryens, it's kind of funny because when you think about the construction of Song of Ice and Fire, it's clearly the idea is Daenerys is the archetype of, you know, she's the rightful monarch who is from a fallen line of great, you know, she's basically from the Númenóreans. I mean, like almost explicitly. Like I'm not even reaching for this. It's right there, right? And it's important that the Númenóreans be in the past, right? It's important that the Valyrians be this destroyed, irrelevant civilization, and it's important that the Targaryen dynasty be destroyed, and that Daenerys be at the bottom of the power hierarchy. She's a woman who was sold into slavery across the sea, right? And then you say, like, okay, now we're going to do the show where these guys are actually in power and everything's awesome for them. And it's like, well, that's totally, I don't care about that. I cared about the girl who was sold into slavery and had no, like, that's interesting. That's dramatic. That's something to root for. The whole Targaryen thing is just an interesting background that explains the current status quo. That doesn't mean I want to see the story of that, right? Now, I know George R. R. Martin's a good storyteller, and he constructed like a fun backstory, but I think I just don't think the backstory suits itself to this medium.
I think it works best as like a broad, like, bit of history that helps reinforce what's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like spoilers, I guess, for what we know is going to happen next in House of the Dragon. Like, this is leading to the Dance of Dragons, right? This is leading to a giant civil war between Targaryens. Like, that's what's going to happen, right? I don't know if that's going to happen this season. Like, is that going to be the capper on the season where one Targaryen declares war on another? But basically, a bunch of people that are related to each other are going to all make claims for the throne, and then they're going to start killing each other. That's what's going to happen. I really like thinking about that right now with how I feel about these characters right now. It's like, I don't care who wins that. Like, tell me someone I should care about. And I don't know, man. I enjoy watching the show, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I slightly feel like when these shows are farther along, or like the first seasons of them are done, I'll just like catch up in a big binge, and then maybe
Sure.
I'll feel differently at that point. But in the week to week, spread out fashion of viewing the episodes, they're leaving me very cold. And that's just where I am. You know, I might change my tune, but I still feel like this emotional reaction I'm having right now is valid.
I will say that I'm watching like 6 shows at the same time right now, and even Rings of Power, which I just talked glowingly about for a while, like is lower down on my list of priorities for like, if I have all 6 shows to watch at the same time, which one am I going to watch first? Like, House of the Dragon's pretty near the bottom, Rings of Power somewhere in the middle. So like, it's a show I like quite a bit. I think there's a lot of better stuff on TV right now.
Yeah, they really should have done the Dunk and Egg stories from the song from the George R. R. Martin. You know, like,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think you take the wrong lessons. It's like you look at the success of Game of Thrones and you're like, oh, it's because people like the dragons, right? It's the dragons. And that's why we have to have at least one 3-minute shot of a dragon in every single episode, even if it's just kind of weird and tacked on. And it's like, no, that's not what people, I mean, the dragons were cool, don't get me wrong, but that's not why people loved your show.
No.
There's plenty of shows with dragons in them.
The dragons only showed up at the end of the first season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in fact, the whole reason that they tricked everyone into, they were explicit about this. They were like, we tricked everyone into liking our fantasy show because nobody likes fantasy. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking from 10, 15 years ago. Nobody likes fantasy. Fantasy's for nerds. There's no way there's ever going to be a mainstream fantasy show. It's impossible. It's a ridiculous idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to swerve into like the dirty, gritty, medieval tone of things. There's barely going to be the slightest hint of anything magical ever. Mm-hmm. And then you end the first season with dragons, and then everybody's already hooked. You tricked them. Good job. Yeah. But then, you know, yeah. Then the whole rest of the show happened. So.
Yeah. I don't care about the dragons. I don't care about the dragons. I care very little about the dragon riders, and that's a problem in your show. So hopefully it's a problem they fix. We'll see. Like I said, Sunday's episode is going to be a 10-year time skip in which we hired a bunch of new actors to play characters. I gotta say, man, I think this is going to be a mistake. I mean, I'm sure the actors are going to be really great, but I think the idea of mid-season replacing actors is not a good call. Like, even The Crown recognized that you had to do it between seasons, that you couldn't do it. You couldn't have a general viewer go one season seeing one character and then one episode seeing one character, and then suddenly there's a new character or a new actor playing that same role. I think it's going to be confusing for the general viewer, and I don't know if it's gonna work. And I don't know if it. Again, this is the thing. I want the show to take more time in the places that's in, and also do more. And I feel like it's like speeding along at the wrong parts. I don't know. I'm so fucking confused about my sayings about this show.
Well, I mean, I think it's because it's taking what was basically a history of like 100 years of Targaryen rule and then trying to make a show out of that. And that's like taking somebody's dry academic dissertation on 1530 to 1630 of the English monarchy and being like, we're going to make this into 2 seasons of television. It's like, okay, I mean, we'll see what happens, I guess. I don't see how that is a story. That's 100 years, right? That's not a story. a story has a kind of organic size to it.
Who do I want to win? I don't know. I don't think any of the characters that are primed to win right now. Maybe they'll introduce some new characters in the next episode.
I want Allison Hightower to win.
I don't think she's gonna, Matt. I don't think she's gonna. But
you're right, though.
And I don't know if the show wants you to want her to. This is confusing.
It's funny because we, we did want the Starks to win, but we also really liked Tyrion. Tyrion was a crucial character, and it was actually a fun and kind of awesome source of tension that, like, at certain points, like, Tyrion would be in a battle against Stark forces, and you'd be like, oh my god, I'm so nervous because, like, I don't want anything to happen to Tyrion, but I also want the Starks to win the battle at the same time. It was this great sense of tension. But the point is, you were rooting for both of them. You weren't like, oh, I guess I'll pick that guy. It was
the show did some smart things, which is immediately position Tyrion as part of a opposing group, but also ostracized from that opposing group. And so you can kind of justify it. And also the big battle, everyone talks about the battle that the show was so broke that there's a big fight in it in which Tyrion hits his head on a rock and like is unconscious during the whole battle. So we don't see any of it. And yes, that's a wonderful strategy for saving money. It's also a wonderful strategy for having your character not kill any of the Stark men. So you don't get confused about what you want to do emotionally in that moment. We knocked him out. Knocked him out. So, like, in the first season, who does Tyrion kill? Does Tyrion kill Starks? No, he kills people of the Vale, and then he gets knocked out during a battle with the Starks, and we don't actually see him hurt anyone.
And we don't like the Vale people anyway. So
because the mom of the Vale breastfeeds her 8-year-old son, so we don't like them. So I mean, like, these are really clever things that they did to kind of, yes, there is tension in the fact that they're on opposing sides, absolutely, especially in the further seasons where he's the hand of the king. But we carefully position him in places where we don't have to see him directly opposed to a lot of the characters we're rooting for. And this show can't do that because the entire show takes place in King's Landing and in 2 rooms, in the small council chamber and in the king's bedroom. And that's it. That's the whole show.
A lot of these rooms having extremely pornographic murals on the walls for some reason.
Yeah.
Which I've seen people comment on that, but I'm like, why is that way? Like, is this a historical thing in Europe, or is this just Targaryens like to have extremely pornographic murals on their walls?
Man, the Targaryens fuck everything and anything, and
I guess
it's I
guess it makes sense.
All right, I think that's going to do it. I just want to say right now that the new Star Wars show Andor came out this week. You and I, after the awful show that was Obi-Wan, I think we both kind of said, hey, we're done with Star Wars now. And Matt, they fucking got me back.
Damn it.
This is a good show. This is a very good show. It is kind of everything you want a Star Wars property to be. And by you, I mean you specifically, in that it has nothing to do. I haven't seen a single lightsaber, no talk of Jedi. It's just a story about, a struggling smuggler trying to make it in evil Empire world. And it's down to earth. I don't want to say like it's gritty because that word is overused, but it's just very well done so far. And I struggled with it at first. The first episode was a little slow for me, and I was having a little bit of trouble getting into the story and its characters. And then by the end of the third episode, which the first 3 episodes came out at the same time, and they did this because they basically play out as it's basically a movie. It's a 90-minute movie basically. And by the end of that 90-minute movie, I was fully in. I was fully in on everything the show was doing. So maybe I'm being hypocritical by saying that it took that long for me, but I wanted to do it. I really did, and it's really good. And I know, Matt, you don't have time for fucking Lord of the Rings, and now I'm telling you to add Star Wars to your list. But this is I'm excited for where it's going. I'll say that.
Okay, all right. I mean, I might try it out. If you tell me I think the ability to binge actually does make a difference in terms of scheduling. And, it might be more prudent for me to just I've made my opening statement in saying that I don't find either of these two fantasy shows to be engaging me, but that could be because of the pacing and the spread out nature. So I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll try not to just weigh in too hard until I've had a chance to like binge and kind of catch up.
Sure. I will say that the best show on TV right now is, once again, I talked about this last year, but oh my God, why am I blanking on the name of the television show?
What's it about?
Reservation Dogs.
Okay. Yes.
Remember I talked.
Yes, I do remember this.
Is that the name of it? Sorry, yes. Reservation Dogs is the name of it. It's on FX. I think its second season is just about to wrap up, and it is so good. It is once again kind of reinventing what it is, and it's a joy to watch, and I love it so much. Cool. Hulu is really killing it. It's got Reservation Dogs. It's got The Patient. Have I talked to you about The Patient before? You
briefly mentioned it, but not on the show, I think.
Yes, Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson. Steve Carell is a psychiatrist. Domhnall Gleeson is a serial killer, and he kidnaps Steve Carell because he doesn't want to be a serial killer anymore. So he says, okay, let's do some sessions in order to help me not want to murder people. It's so good. It's so good. And the episodes are like 25 minutes long, which makes it even better.
Yeah, perfect.
So Patient and Reservation Dogs, both on Hulu, better than every show we've talked about today. Love them both. Check them out.
Awesome.
But I don't know. Rings of Power. I'm enjoying it.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's a lot of TV. There's too much TV.
There is too much TV. There's always too much TV. But there's also too many podcasts, so we won't waste any more of your time with this one because that's all we had. If you have any opinions on any of the TV shows we talked about today or on Ridley Scott's A Good Year, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia.com or on Twitter at doofmedia. Of course, you can always go to our subreddit, that's r/doofmedia, and find the thread for this very episode and let us know what you think there as well.
It's a good year, like a good vintage of wine. Get it? Okay. If you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head over to patreon.com/doofmedia and support us at any of the available dollar levels. You get a whole bunch of bonus stuff, including getting to help pick the Doof Canon episode each month. That poll just ended, I think, but so you missed it for this month, but you'll be there for next month. Speaking of which, Matt, next week on the show, we're going to be covering the Bong Joon-ho film Parasite because our patrons decided that that's what they wanted for us to consider for the canon. So that's what we're doing next week.
Awesome. Sounds fun. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us to get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, we will see you next week for Parasite. Go watch it and be ready to decide whether you think it's worthy to be entered into the canon. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.